How do you determine the value of your home? Well, there's really two ways of looking at this, okay? The first way is the approach an appraiser will take. And the second way is what an agent should do, which is basically judge the home by the market action on the home, okay? Now, they're both, when you price your home and you try to value your home, they're both involved with the process. And let me explain that. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to go in and you're going to do a lot of homework in regards to the house. How much did your neighbor sell for? Is my home comparable to them? What does Zillow, what does Redfin, what does Trulia, what does Realtor.com, what did they say my house is valued at? All of that information is extremely important to you as a consumer. You knowing that, and you probably already know that, you're going to know that your neighbors sold for this or for that, and you're going to kind of have an idea of what their house looked like, and you're going to be able to compare that to your property. Okay, so that's kind of how you start off, and that's how the typical consumer, when we go into their home, that's where they're at in the process. Okay, so where do you go from there? Now, what you're going to get most of the time is a comparative market analysis, all right, which is basically somebody bringing in information that shows you this is what this property sold for, this is what this property sold for, and this is what this property sold for. And then you'll take that information and you'll compare it to your house, okay? Now, this is probably the lowest amount of information you can get from an agent because it's very simple to do, and it's an easy way to look at things and say, hey, this is a cost comparison approach based on what they sold for, and here's probably what I'm going to sell for. Now, what this doesn't do is it doesn't take into consideration any market conditions, okay? So which way is the market going? Is there any information in regards to why the market's going in this direction or that direction? How much inventory is on the market? Who am I going to be competing against? What properties are buyers buying right now? How many of those properties that are under contract, how many showings did they have? These sort of things you won't get answered when you just do a straight comparative market analysis, okay? Now, if you want a really detailed comparative market analysis, then what you'll want to do is hire an appraiser. An appraiser will come out and they will give you a full report. They'll compare anywhere from 3 to 6 properties that sold, and they'll give you that report in real time based on properties that sold in the past, okay? So that's the way that you can kind of come up with a value on your home, all right? Now, and that's the way you're probably going to be treated by most agents. They're going to give you something like this, all right? But the truth is that there is an entirely different sector to this, right? We call that just simply doing the math on the property, just simply coming up with an idea of what the property will sell for based on some information, and all of it based on the past, okay? So you got to consider that all of those properties that you're looking at with a comparative market analysis, they're sold and those buyers are not in the market anymore, okay? Those buyers are done. So you also have to consider what is going to happen to my property when it hits the market, okay? The market is different than the math. The market is the current buyers that are in the market, and they're going to be the ones that determine the value of your home, okay? They're the ones who are going to say yes or no to your house, and they're the ones who are going to be buying it. And they are really the primary focus of what we do. We are primarily focused on trying to determine and come up with a pricing strategy that's going to get those buyers into your house and trying to predict what they plan to do in the market now. Now, how can you do this as a consumer? Well, first of all, you can look at things like Zillow. Okay, so say you have a neighbor down the street the house is very comparable to yours, right? And it lines up bedrooms, baths, upgrades. It's all pretty close. It's same model. It's very similar to yours. And you know that they're priced at, let's say, $400,000. And let's say that in your opinion, that's probably a little bit too high, but you want to know for sure if it is high. How can you check? Well, if you go on Zillow and you actually look at that property, you'll see the activity on it, all right? The activity is going to show you the views and the saves, okay? That's all it's going to give you. It's not going to give you the showings. That would take an agent to get you that information, but it will show you the views and saves. And from our tracking over years, what you need on a property to garnish 2 to 3 offers on it is around 1,300 saves and about 1,300 views and about 130 saves, and that should happen within a 30-day time frame. Okay, so you can use that as a correlation of what is going on with that property. And generally speaking, if there's 1,300 views and 130 saves, you're going to have about 13 showings, which will garnish 1 to 2 offers. Okay, if that is happening within a 30-day time frame, that kind of activity on a home, that means that the buyers, they like the price and they're showing up to the house and they are going to move on that property at some point. If you have that kind of trajectory when your house goes on the market week over week over week and you're tracking this information, then you can feel confident knowing that you're going to have a strong buyer come in within the first 30 days. And that's the goal of the listing. And that's what you need to know in order to know whether or not your home is valued correctly. Okay. The value of the home is going to be strictly determined by the buyers, all right? Not the math that you do prior to trying to figure out the list price. What we do is we take that information from the comparative market analysis and we say, let's establish a range. We know that if you put your house up for this price, it would sell in a microsecond. If you put it up at this price, we think it's overpriced. That's a good range. And typically houses will fall within a $100,000 price range. In there is where you want to pick your price, depending on what kind of activity your competition is getting within that $100,000 price range. Now, the next thing you want to do after you've done this, you've determined activity levels, you know your floor and your ceiling for pricing. You know that in that range you're going to fall somewhere, and you know that there's 2 or 3 other homes that are on the higher end of that, and they don't have a whole lot of activity. Okay, so how do you now determine which homes are buyers buying? You have to look at pending transactions, okay? Which homes in the same area are currently pending? That represents buyers that actually went into the home and executed a contract and they're willing to pay that price. Okay, you can look at a pending transaction, you can look at the history on it, and you can see exactly what happened with this house. Was it priced appropriately? Did it go on the market and did it get a buyer quickly within 30 days, and is it under contract? Or did they go on the market high and have to do several price drops until they finally got a buyer that came in, made an offer, and moved forward with the purchase? Which one of those is the current circumstance of this house? Okay, that's very important to know. Once you've determined that is the case, then at that point, the next thing you want to do is you want to get an idea of what are buyers looking at in what price ranges. Okay, so you can establish that with a showing report. Okay, as an agent, we pay for these reports. We pay for things that will show you within your neighborhood, within your zip code, within your your city boundaries, where are buyers looking and at what price ranges. Okay, so if you're considering, let's say you're looking at this and you know that the on the higher end is $400,000 and there's 3 homes for sale that you're going up against, and those 3 homes are priced at $400,000, 380, 375. They're around that price and they're not getting any activity. Okay, and then you pull up the pending transactions. Okay, let's say there's one pending transaction and it's pending at 365. And when you look at the information on that, you say, okay, this house went on the market. It was on the market for 3 weeks. It got a contract. It's now under contract. Okay, so the next thing you want to look at is, where are buyers scheduling showings within this price ranges between 300,000 and 400,000? Who and how many appointments are being scheduled in that price range? And you can see that down to $10,000. So you can go from $300,000 to $400,000 and see how many showings are being scheduled every $10,000. That will give you an exact idea of how many buyers are in those price brackets. Okay, so if there's, let's say that there's between 370 and 400,000. Let's say that there's a total of 30 showings. But if you look at the same total between 350 and 370, let's say there's 50 showings. Okay, now between 325 and 350, let's say there's 25, 30 showings in there. You know that there is 50 buyers looking right now around 350 up to about 370. Okay, so you now have taken that $100,000 price range and you've summed it down to about a $20,000 range. All right, and at this point you want to decide, where do you want to price it within that $20,000? Instead of the $100,000, you have a $20,000 range to pick from. You get it on the market at a price you pick, and then most likely at that point, you'll be able to see what kind of activity you're getting. You put it up, let's say it performs fairly well in the first couple of weeks. You start to get a lot of activity. You start to get a lot of showings. Now you know that the price of the property is acceptable from the buyers, and you're getting this kind of activity. You're getting these showings. People are showing up at open houses. The activity levels are on par with what will garnish an offer. And that is how you determine value of a property. It's not just a CMA giving you a whole bunch of numbers. It's determining the market, determining what buyers are going to do, and pricing it attractively to get them into your house. This market's soft, it's tough, but if you use this strategy, if you use this approach to pricing your house, it turns out to be very, very successful. The flip side of this is trying to sell it for $400,000 like your neighbors are doing, sit on the market for a long time, the property gets super stagnant, and then next thing you know, you're doing price drops, price drops, price drops, and you thought you might get $400,000 for the house. However, in reality, you probably could have got $465,000, but now because of time on market and because of stagnation and because of price decay, you end up getting something like $450,000 or $440,000 or something like that, and it took a lot longer to sell. It's a very unfortunate thing that happens in our market, but it does happen a lot. So, as always, we're here and happy to help. If you or anybody you know is looking to buy or sell, or would like to send us some recommendations, we love to help anybody, and I just enjoy keeping you guys up to date on the market and giving you guys information to help you make decisions. So take care, and I'll talk to you soon.